This is Road Noise, episode number 3, My Great Week. And of course a truck goes by. Ooh, it's a casino truck. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Road Noise. I'm your host, Michael Blackston, and I wanted to step in right quick and record a quick little intro before the meat of this podcast to let you know that what you're about to hear was recorded back in April of 2015. And the reason I'm releasing it now is I've been thinking about doing this podcast for quite a while, and there have been several trips that I've taken, and I've recorded a lot of audio. And there's been a lot of stuff that I just didn't want to throw away. You know, when you make something and create content, it's kind of like your baby, and you don't want to throw it away. And I thought it was a pretty good episode, so I want to release it to you. Also, I want there to be consistency in the timeline for this episode. If you go back and listen to episodes in the far future and say there's 200 episodes of this podcast, I want when you get to these episodes down here, I don't want it to be all jumbled up and mixed up. I want it to be consistent and continuity in the timeline. And so that's why I went ahead and released this one. As it is, I'm going to try to get everything done as far as uploaded to the internet and everything using my data on my phone. Who knows what's going to happen to the data on my phone, but I want to release this. I'm on the road back from... Where did I go? Oh, hey, Clinton, North Carolina. Yeah, I really need to be driving. I'm on the road from Clinton, North Carolina, back to my house in Elberton, Georgia, and I'm going to turn right around almost as soon as I get home, and my wife and my child, my son, my oldest child, Noah, are going on our Orlando trip to Universal Studios. It's finally here. I talked about it, I think, on an earlier episode that I released. I know I talked about it on an episode, but I'm not sure if it's one that I've released yet, because there's other episodes that I have not released that I've recorded back yonder in time. So I just wanted to say that at the beginning of this episode to let you know, if you hear April 2015, you're not behind. I'm just releasing it now so that it's continuous and given a good, consistent timing in the timeline as these podcasts are released. I've only got a couple more like this, and I'm gonna do a recap of our Orlando trip that I'll be releasing, and who knows, if I feel like it, I'm gonna take this stuff with me. Me and my son may even do some stuff on the road as my wife is driving, because she'll be doing most of the driving to Orlando since I've been driving on the road half the day myself. So who knows what you'll get, and it'll be fun if you do. But this is an episode you're about to hear that was recorded back in April of this year. It is now October, middle of October 2015, and we're almost caught up, and before too long, it's all going to be what happened to me almost right before you heard the podcast as it was immediately released. So I just wanted to tell you that so you didn't kind of go, wait a minute, April? So there you go. Enjoy the show. Good afternoon. It may be afternoon for you. It may not be afternoon for you, but it's afternoon for me, and I'm Mike Blackston, and this is Road Noise, and I appreciate you listening and tuning in and giving us a chance. If you've listened to any of the other episodes, you know that this is a brand new podcast, and listening back to it, I've noticed a few things that I want to change already about the way that I present the material and content in this podcast to you, so that it gets closer to the heart of what I had in mind when I decided to do Road Noise. I want this podcast to be about my experiences and about things that have happened in my life, but things that I can use in order to be an example to maybe uplift you or give you something to laugh about. It just depends on whatever my mood is, but I did notice that in the last couple of recordings that I've done, whether they're test recordings or I end up releasing them or not, I've noticed a couple of things. First of all, I've noticed that in the other ones, I seem to be a little, I don't want to say melodramatic, and I don't want to say sad. Sad's not even the right word. I just didn't have any energy. You know, it was kind of like this right here, and I don't know, I felt like I was on NPR or something. And one of the things that has always excited me about the podcast that I listen to is the excitement in the voice of the presenter. So I want to bring excitement to the podcast, and so I'm hoping that that's what I'm doing now, but at the same time being genuine. Another way that I want to be genuine with this podcast is to not use my radio voice. I am a Southern dude. When I co-host the podcast with Tony King, Q1 Go the Theater Show, I use my Southern accent. I don't do any sort of radio voice or anything like that, but when I get behind a microphone by myself and I'm the only one presenting, I guess because of my old radio experience, I just get right back into this and I start doing this right here. Well, it doesn't sound right. I mean, if I'm in a radio station and I'm being a radio DJ, I'm spinning the tunes and I'm doing this and trying to sound what we called our generic voice, what really didn't have a dialect, then, this might be right here what I did. But I think I have a little too much of that coming through with the other podcasts. So if my voice sounds a little bit different, the reason is because I want to be genuine. I want you to get me. I don't want you to get some fake version of me. So if hopefully I'll stay completely excited and energetic and true to my real self so that you get an honest picture of my life, which if you're listening to this and if you've decided this is something you want to continue listening to, that's what you're going to want. I really feel that in my heart. So with this episode, I've decided that I wanted to tell you about the week that I had this week because I'm so excited about this week, you just can't understand. Have you ever had one of those weeks where it seemed like, yeah, there were some things going on in life and things that were frustrating, but every time something frustrating happened, it was met with something awesome? Those kind of weeks don't come very often for many of us. Most of the time, it's just the grind, and one of the reasons you may be listening to this podcast is because you're wanting to find something to give you some uplifting insight on the world, maybe something to laugh about, like I said earlier, because of that grind, because of everything you have to deal with in the outside world, and hopefully I can help you have something nice to listen to. Well, I had one of those weeks this week that I'm talking about is very rare. There were some things that were not so fun about it, but there were some awesome things about it as well. And now, these things may not have been awesome to you if you were to be the one experiencing them, but for me, it just kind of built on itself to a climax last night. And by the time I get to the list of all of the exciting things that have happened to me, there were about 4 things that are bullet points I want to tell you about in succession. When I get to the last one, it just culminates in something that was fantastic because I've been working on it for a long time, but I don't want to jump ahead of myself. Let me start off by telling you the last few weeks with my job have been very, how do I want to say it? I'll just say frustrating. It's been very frustrating because, as I've said before, in my type of work, there are peaks and valleys. It's feast or famine. Well, it had been in the famine times, and I knew that the feast times were coming because of some of the work that I had to do. The preliminary work that leads up to the stuff that gets me paid has been coming in, but all of the work that I've been doing up until this point, I haven't really been getting paid for anything for a while. And so I've been very frustrated, hard to pay the bills, hard to make ends meet. You have a good time, you have a good time of feast, and you put money back, and then the bills keep coming, but then the work slows down, and so the money that you put back gets used for living expenses and bills and stuff like that until you've realized that, oh boy, now I don't have very much left. The cupboard is dry, and I have work that needs to be done that is not available for me yet. So it was very frustrating. It was almost like I knew the work was coming, and I knew the time was going to be good, and I was going to be very busy, but it was almost like that carrot that you dangle in front of the horse, and he just keeps moving, trying to get that carrot, but the more he moves, the further he moves, the further away the carrot gets, and it just gets frustrating. And that's the way it's been for me. But as I foresaw, and as is normal in my type of work, it started rolling around. I started getting the phone calls. Michael, when can you come? I need you to do this. And then the phone calls have been ringing off the hook. So last week, the phone started ringing off the hook for me, and I began to book myself out of town, and now I'm 2.5 weeks booked ahead. So that's a wonderful thing. So that was number one. Work started coming in, and Tuesday, I didn't get a chance to go to work Monday because the first place that I had booked wouldn't get the truck full of materials in until Monday evening, so there was no need for me to go until Tuesday morning. So I went Tuesday morning, and I got up really early in the morning, and I drove to Carbon Hill, Alabama. You'll hear me talk about Alabama all the time. In fact, as I record this, I am just on the Atlanta side of Birmingham, between Birmingham and Atlanta, headed back home from this trip, recording this podcast. So I got up Tuesday morning, all excited. Yes, work is about to come again. I've got some things in place so that hopefully the next valley and famine time won't hurt as hard. And so I really feel like, number one, the week started off on a really good note because I'm starting to work again. Things are looking up. My prayer life is much more active than it has been in a long time. I'm feeling a lot closer to God, and things are just working out really, really well. So that was number one. Finally getting to work again. So I head to Carbon Hill, and I do my work Tuesday, all day Tuesday, and I go back to the hotel. Well, I am a playwright. If I haven't mentioned that before, you'll know enough about it if you listen to further episodes. I am a writer, and one of my favorite things to do is write plays. I've started several of them, but recently I have been able to learn how to dedicate myself to commit to something and complete it. And not long ago, in 2013, I was able to complete my very first full-length drama called Mr. Long Said Nothing, and was able to see it after some friends read it and really liked it. We did a public reading, and that went so well that the local theater where I live decided to allow me to produce a full 6-show inaugural run for it, and I was able to direct and produce Mr. Long Said Nothing, my very first play, and see that actually acted out real time with real actors and a real audience, and it was fantastic. But now I've been working on another one, this time a comedy. And I've been working on it for a long, long time. Well, the reason I'm excited, for one thing, is last week I had been writing on the play, and I'm getting towards the end of the play. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I realized one morning as I was sitting in a McDonald's having my coffee trying to write, I realized I had written myself into a corner that I didn't know how I was going to get out of. I had an idea of what I wanted to go on with this play, but I wasn't sure exactly how to get there. There was something blocking me. Plot lines and things that needed to happen with the play, I couldn't figure out how to get there, and it got really frustrating for me then, because ask any writer who really has a groove going with not a show, but a piece of literature that they're working on, and they really get going on it and get close to the end and then hit the writer's block right there near the end. That is so very frustrating. There's an 18-wheeler next to me that did not like the idea that I was going to get past him in the left-hand lane, so he decided to speed up. If that's what you heard, the kind of high-pitched whine, if you hear that, I don't know if you can or not, but if you did, that's what that was. Anyway, so I had written myself into a corner, and I didn't know what to do, so I decided that instead of beating my head against the wall to try to figure out what to do and forcing it, I would just kind of let it lie until the inspiration hit again. And it hit Tuesday night. So I went to McDonald's, and I sat down, had my cup of coffee, They're in Winfield, Alabama, and I started writing my play, and I wrote a couple of sentences, and all of a sudden, the lights from heaven just opened up and allowed me to continue on with the play in a direction that I wanted to go. And it actually changed a little bit from my original plan for how it would all play out towards the climax comically at the end, but I like what I ended up writing even better. So that worked out wonderfully. So I start getting ready, and I've got I time my plays as I'm writing them because there's a certain time frame I like to try to keep them within. And I knew I had about 20 minutes left to write, 20 minutes worth of actual acting time dialogue that needed to be written down. So I started writing that. Okay, well, I'm already in kind of this euphoria because things are going well. I'm working again. It's the first night. Yes, I'm away from my family, and I don't like being away from my family any more than the next guy, but at the same time, I am finally working again. So I was in a good mood. The play is moving again. Well, in walks a group of teenagers, mostly young teenage girls, 15, 16, 17-year-old age range, and they sat about 2 booths ahead of me and across a little bit, and they were loud. There were about 7 or 8 of them all crammed in together around this table, and they were as loud and obnoxious as you can imagine. There were a couple of guys in there, but they were as loud and obnoxious as the girls were. And at first, it bothered me because I'm thinking, here I am. It's late. It was kind of late. I went in there late because I thought that I would have a little privacy. There shouldn't be a whole lot of people in there. And I'm thinking, it's late. It's a school night. And here come these young people, and they're being very obnoxious. Don't they see me over here trying to write? I can't concentrate. And I wanted to get ill, but then all of a sudden I heard someone say something about there's something in the glade there. And my attention perked up because I knew that the local theater in Winfield, Alabama was currently rehearsing Into the Woods Junior. So I started kind of eavesdropping on this group of kids, and what I realized was that at least most of them, were the cast of Into the Woods Junior. Well, I'm a musical theater nerd. One of my other podcasts is Q1 Go, the theater show, so that just was right down my alley. So I wrote a little as I could, but I kept half an ear on this group of kids, and the more I listened to them, the more I realized they weren't trying to be obnoxious. They were just having a good time. They had come out of rehearsal, I think. And I've been in that situation where I'm with my cast, we're having fun, we're just in that zone that you get in when you're with a family of castmates and you're just having a great time and you don't want the night to end, and you go somewhere and you try to just keep the celebration going. If you've never had that, all I can tell you is get involved with your local theater, get to be a part of a cast, and see what I'm talking about. It is absolutely a wonderful thing. And I began to take on some of that excitement that they had because I knew what they were going through. I knew what was kind of going through their minds at the time and the rush that they were experiencing. Well, I couldn't help myself. I decided it was getting close to time for McDonald's to close the lobby, and I decided that I would ask them if they were the cast for Into the Woods Junior. And so I walked over kind of awkwardly. Here's this 40-something guy going up to a group of mostly teenage girls. That never seems to me anything but creepy. But anyway, I said, I'm sorry to interrupt you guys, but I can't help but hear you because you're loud, and that's okay. It's great. But are you the cast of Into the Woods Junior? And they said, yeah. Well, and a couple of them said, well, I'm not in it, but they are. And so I had this idea. I'm going to get them to record an intro for me for the Q1 Go podcast. We hadn't had anything really unique yet going on. We'd just been trying to keep the podcast going. We were I had just released episode number 9, so we're relatively new there. And I didn't have anything cool like a cast from any show introducing the show, so I thought that would be really nice. So I had them all together say, and I recorded it on an audio recorder I have on my phone, we're the cast of Into the Woods Junior in Winfield, Alabama, and you're listening to Q1 Go, the theater show. And it turned out really cool. So that was the second great thing that happened. And it may seem like nothing to anybody else, but to me, that was kind of a stepping stone for my podcast, the Q1 Go podcast, because I kind of broke out of a shyness when it comes to talking to other people and getting them to do things that might will help your show, and introducing yourself and promoting the show and stuff like that, because it's real easy for me to get behind this microphone while I'm driving down the road by myself in the car. It's really easy for me to do that. I'm an ex-radio guy. I can talk behind a microphone all day long, but when it comes to actually approaching a stranger, striking up a conversation, I'll bet you that somebody that's listening to this will understand what I mean when I say that's scary. And so many times I want to do something, I'll have a great idea, but I can't make myself broach the subject, break the ice with a stranger. And especially somebody like me who grew up very shy as a kid in high school. My experience with high school age girls, all I have to draw on is shyness and insecurity and awkwardness. And I actually psychologically go back to that a lot of times when I'm dealing with people, girls especially, of that age, because that's just where my mind goes, because it's what I was used to as a high school student. I have a lot of friends who are young ladies of the high school age because of the involvement that I have in the local theater, and they're great friends of mine. I don't have any problem, but the ice was broken during rehearsals. I got to know them and became part of their family, their theater family. These were strangers, and they were young girls, and I was very, very nervous about talking to them. And that was great for me because I was able to just go up, stand there, and say, hi, this is who I am. And you know what? They thought it was really, really cool that I hosted a podcast. They were so excited to get to listen back to it. And then last night, I met the sister of one of them in that same McDonald's, and she mentioned how excited her sister was that they'd gotten the opportunity to do that. So another great way that my week just kept getting better, just the warm fuzzies and the oogie gooey feeling of awesomeness just compounded on itself Tuesday night. So I wake up Wednesday morning and I don't feel so well. I didn't sleep really well, and part of the reason on Tuesday night, that is, and part of the reason I'm sure had to do with the fact that I did not mention for them to give me decaf coffee at McDonald's. And so at 10:30 in the evening I was drinking fully loaded regular coffee and a medium-sized cup. So I was up for a while and had a hard time sleeping. When I did go to sleep, it just was kind of fitful. So I didn't feel really good physically on Wednesday, and I got up and I went into work and I started working. I was etching an American flag, and American flags are one of the most tedious, time-consuming, and physically taxing etchings for someone in my line of work to do, because especially if it's in color, which this was, because you have to scratch the polish off of the stone enough for those bold, bright colors to take and bond to the natural porous surface of the stone underneath the polish. And so by the half point of the day, I was already as tired as if I had been working a full day, and my head was hurting, and I really just was getting, I don't want to use the word frustrated again because that's not right, and I don't want to wear out that word, but frustration was part of the way I was feeling. I was overwhelmed a little bit and felt like I just needed a break and a breath of fresh air for the rest of the day. Well, the wonderful thing about being your own boss, and because of the way my schedule was laid out, I knew I really had the opportunity to do it. I went ahead and took the rest of the day off. I decided that I was going to make good on a promise I had made to myself earlier in the month when I had seen on the internet that there was an old movie studio set, well, not a studio, but a movie set in Alabama They had filmed a little over 10 years ago at the time of this recording, back in, well, the movie was released in 2003. The movie Big Fish with Ewan McGregor and several other people. It was a wonderful movie, one of my favorites. It was nominated for a couple of Academy Awards. It's a really good movie, and it had this fantastical look and feel to it. It was a Tim Burton film, and it was filmed almost entirely in Alabama. And there's this one sequence in the film where Ewan McGregor had decided to leave town on foot and walk off on an adventure, and he came to a fork in the road, and one went the normal way, but one went through this dark and gloomy, scary forest, and the choice was his which way he wanted to take. So he decides, why not have an adventure? So he goes through the dark woods. And he goes through, and some bugs try to get him, and it's a really tense, kind of scary moment. But when he comes out on the other end of the forest, he comes into a clearing, and it's bright sunshine, beautiful utopia area with a little small town. It's a field with just one road down the middle of a small town. There's not even a road, it's just a lane of grass. And as he comes through and breaks through the dark forest and into the light of the town is called Spectre, Alabama. He enters through, it's almost like a portal. There's this circular gnarl of trees of the dark forest, and once he goes through that circle, he goes into the town, and you can see the town through the dark circle in the movie. Well, the town of Spectre, Alabama, where Tim Burton filmed that section, is in a place called Millbrook, Alabama, on Jackson Lake Island. I found this out on the internet, that it is still standing, and Spectre is probably, the sequence from Spectre, Alabama is probably my favorite sequence in that entire movie. Every time I watch it, I just think, I love the way this whole thing is designed. It's really cool. It gives you a sense of peace, and it's wonderful, and it makes me happy when I watch the movie. That's my favorite part, and I look forward to it every time. So when I found out that the town of Spectre is actually still there, man, I was like, I've got to see that one day. And I go to Alabama all the time. Certainly, I will one day have an opportunity to drive down to Millbrook and see the town of Spectre, Alabama, what's left of the movie set. And that's exactly what I decided to do on Wednesday. I said, you know what? I've got a half day. It's a gorgeous day. It feels awesome outside. I need some fresh air. I'm going to roll down the window. I looked on the GPS and found out that Millbrook was only 2 hours from where I was. Had to go back into Birmingham and down 65 south towards Montgomery. Millbrook is right outside of Montgomery. So I told the folks I was working for that I'd see them in the morning. I wasn't feeling well. I was going to take a drive. They said okay, and off I went. Made sure with the wife first that it wasn't something she minded me doing by myself, because she likes to do stuff like that too, and I didn't want to experience that without her permission. So I called her, and she said, sure, Michael, go ahead and do that. And so I drove down to just outside of Montgomery, Alabama, to Millbrook, Alabama, asked around, used the information that I found on the internet about how to kind of find it, and I did. It cost me $3 whole, minus the gas and mileage on the car and stuff like that. But as far as out-of-pocket paying to go see it, it cost me $3. And how fantastic is it to get to actually walk down the street, that path of a place that whenever I watch that movie, it just kind of takes me to a place of happiness. Now, in real life, this thing has been standing abandoned for over 10 years. The elements of time and weather have definitely gotten to it. It's falling apart, but there's enough of it left that it is still a fantastic experience. You still can get the visual from the movie. When you walk up, they tell you from the start, anybody that knows you're coming in, they'll tell you right from the start that there's only about 40% of the little town left, and it's all facade. It was a movie set. There's only 40% of it left because there's a section on either side of the little lane that in the movie were brick buildings, and they were never brick. They were brick facade, but in the movie they were brick buildings, streets, shops, businesses. And something happened. Apparently there was a fire or something, and they had to tear those down. But the houses and then the church at the end of the street are still there. But what really was exciting to me when I pulled up, I'm sitting here enunciating my words like this the more I think about this, and I'm sounding more and more like my radio DJ guy, and I'm not trying to. Let's get back to my real accent here. What excited me when I drove up and I got out of my car, and the first thing you want to do is you want to go stand at the point where in the movie you first see Spectre. You want to get into position there and see that shot for yourself. I always thought that in the movie, that gnarly circle of trees in the dark forest that framed the little town when he first saw it, I always thought that was probably CGI, something that they added in. No, those were actually propped trees that they built, and they're still there. You can get on the other side of those prop trees. They're styrofoam and plaster, and they're still standing there, and you can actually see and frame your view through that circular gnarl of trees. And I don't know why, but that was probably, that view, the coolest of the entire experience. And when you walk through the gnarl of trees, the first thing you come to is, and in the movie, you'll see it, he notices a post on each side of the lane, like a telephone pole, with a line between them, and strung all the way across the line are dozens of pairs of shoes, or maybe at least a dozen pairs of shoes, where the shoestrings were tied together and then thrown up on the line to hang there. And he notices that when he walks in, that those shoes are all there, and it's kind of like, oh, that's odd. What's that for? And so those poles are still there. The line is gone, and I was kind of bummed because I had thought, if I ever come back, I'm gonna climb up, put a ladder up there, put a line, and I'm gonna throw some shoes up there, because if this place is gonna be here, there need to be shoes hanging from a line. But the poles that held that line are still there. And you can walk down and you can see all of these homes and these home fronts, at least, and these facades of these things that they built that you see in the movie. And one of the things I did was I had my telephone on me and I turned on Netflix, and Big Fish happened to be, I don't know if it still is when you're listening to this, but at the time it's being recorded, Big Fish is available on Netflix. And so I turned it on, and to Big Fish, to that scene where he first comes through, and I actually watched the movie and followed Ewan McGregor's steps, followed along the scene as he's first coming into town with him walking in real life down the street of Spectre. And it was just one of those moments where everybody has movies that they like and shows that they like and scenes that just really inspire them and get to them. Every time, from the first time I ever saw that movie, the way it was shot, I always thought, wow, I really wish there was a Spectre. And if there was a Spectre, I would love to just go there and sit and write. In the movie, the town's poet laureate had gone there, or the town that Ewan McGregor came from, they had all talked about how the poet laureate had just walked off one day and never came back. Well, when he goes into the town of Spectre, he finds out that the poet laureate had found Spectre and he'd never left, because that's the whole thing. Once you found Spectre, you never returned. It was so perfect, it was so wonderful, you took off your shoes and you never left. And it just, I don't know, it spoke to me. It always has. And every time I watched that movie, I wanted to see that. I wanted to be a part of it. So to find out that I could actually go visit Spectre, Alabama, even though it was run down, and even though it wouldn't be like it was in the movie. It would be movie facades. Being a theater person anyway, I knew what to expect. It was still one of the coolest experiences I have ever had. And so my week just kept getting better. I forgot about my headache. I forgot about my fatigue. I took a video walkthrough going through the town, about an 8-minute video. It's just a really neat thing, and it made the rest of my week, it continued my week in that upward spiral of excitement and happiness and euphoria and just having a wonderful week. I'm missing my kids by then. I'm missing my wife by then, but I'm constantly in communication with them, and everything's going well at home. And although I miss them, I wasn't sitting in a hotel room twiddling my thumbs, wondering what to do next. I was actually experiencing life and having a wonderful, wonderful time doing it. So that was what happened on Wednesday. And by the time I got back to the hotel room from that trip, because it was a 2-hour drive one way, then a 2-hour drive back, and I had to get something to eat. I found a place to get something to eat and then went back to my hotel room, took a shower, and went to bed. And I woke up Thursday morning, yesterday, as this is being recorded, and felt a whole lot better than I had when I woke up Wednesday morning. I didn't realize the accomplishment that would happen later that night, last night. I did my work. I got to the point where I couldn't do any more work for the day. I got to a stopping point, and there was one more job to be done, but the stone wasn't up on the table, and the guy who moves the stone wasn't there, so there was nothing I could do. It was time to pack it up and go in for the day, and I decided I'm going to get moving on this play and get as close to finishing it as I can. I had found a comfortable spot at that McDonald's in Winfield, Alabama, so I went back and I got myself a Big Mac meal. Yeah, I know that's not good for me, but I did it anyway because I was hungry. I pulled out my 3-ring binder that I keep loose leaf notebook paper in when I write my plays, turned to the page that I had left off on and began to write. And I wrote, and I wrote. And the more I wrote, the more I laughed and smiled, sometimes to the point where I had to look around and make sure nobody was looking because it was working just the way it needed to work, and it just kept flowing from my pen. And the more I wrote, the faster I wrote, and the faster I wrote, the tireder my hand got, but the more excited I got. And so you just stop for a second, shake off your hand, and shake the tiredness out of it, and keep writing. And friends, the last thing I wrote last night in the play, when I got to my stopping point, these were the words that I was able to write. And it was the cause of me not being able to sleep well again last night. Those words were, End Act 2, The End. 11:40 p.m., April the 9th, 2015. To write that, to finish, there's really nothing that I can say unless you're a writer. Those 6 letters, those 2 words that are comprised of 6 little letters, the end, those are the biggest, most wonderful, and I'll admit it, bittersweet, because although you're so excited about accomplishing something, you've accomplished it. It's over. It's time to, well, in reality, it's time to start doing phase 2 and draft 2 and editing and tweaking and shaping and rounding the story up. There's more to be done, but the story is done, and the feeling that a writer gets when they get to write the end is something I won't even really attempt to put it in words in this podcast. If you ever want to get a better idea, just go talk to a writer about writing. What a wonderful cap off to what had just grown and blossomed into a wonderful week, and it excited me to no end to get to do that. And I called my wife and I said, oh, I'm gonna dial this phone, and I can't wait to tell my wife. And of course it went to voicemail because I was in the central time zone and my wife was an hour ahead of me and already asleep, so I had to wait till the morning to talk to her about it. But she did congratulate me first thing in the morning before I woke up. She saw the text and I sent her a text when I couldn't reach her on the phone, and she saw that and congratulated me. And I've already sent her the manuscript, because the one thing about my wife is I do have test readers. I have people who look forward to reading my work when I finish it and give me their thoughts, but they get draft 2. My wife is the only person who gets draft 1. I finish a story, my wife has the privilege of being the number one person to read it. And so hopefully, as I'm recording this, she's reading it right now. I know she has it. It's been sent to her. And she's a reading nut. She loves to read, so she's probably already digging into it. Hopefully she is. And she may have already finished it because she's also a speed reader. So now it's time to start draft 2. And I don't think there's a whole lot I'm going to do. I'm going to ramp up some of the ridiculousness of a couple of the characters in some of their dialogue, but not by too much, because I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And what I have learned with all of my art, whether it's visual art, photography, writing, composing, I have learned that the artist's gut, the initial original feeling that the artist gets of completion, is the most honest, in my opinion. Yes, there's always room for improvement and tweaking, but that's all it is, tweaking a little bit. I'm not going to mess with it too much if I'm happy with it. And so draft number 2 will be coming out shortly, and my proofreaders will be reading it and letting me know what they think and seeing if they see any plot holes and things like that I didn't catch. They probably won't catch anything because my wife will have already told me if there were any plot holes that she caught, and she's good at that. So that's the next move. I'm almost ready to send out to my readers my second drama. I've written a musical. I wrote a musical and completed it a long time ago, but there's a lot of revision that's going on with that right now. In fact, that's the very next thing I'm going to do once the second and final draft is done with this play, and all I'm doing is trying to get somebody to read it and let me produce it, and I'm not doing anything else to it. Then the next item on the agenda for creation is to revamp and tweak and complete The Right Song, which is my musical. There's a lot of tweaking, a lot of revision that's got to go on with that, and some holes I need to fill, and it's a good looking statue, but it needs some polishing. Let's just put it to you that way. I'll also have to be composing the music to that. The music's already actually composed and written in my head, but I've got to put it all down. So that's going to take a while, and I'm looking forward to getting started with that. But right now, the working title of the play that I've been telling you about in this podcast is called Friends Like You. That's the working title. I don't know whether or not that's going to end up being the title. That's one of the things my readers will kind of weigh in on, is how they feel about that as the title, but we'll see. I have a good group of people who are wonderful friends of mine, very intelligent, literate people who are also honest with me, because they know that that's the most important thing. They know that if I'm going to write something and I'm going to pursue it, I would much rather them be brutally honest with me, and if it's crap, they'll tell me it's crap, because I don't want to go forward with something that is crap because they didn't want to hurt my feelings, and they understand that. So that's a wonderful thing. So I'm going into the weekend. I'm on my way through Alabama from Birmingham as I record this, like I told you earlier. Looking over to my left, I'm looking at, I guess it's really kind of the start of the Blue Ridge Mountains and foothills. There's mountainous areas here as I drive through Oxford and Anniston, Alabama, down Interstate 20, heading east into Atlanta. And it's just a wonderful time of the day. It feels great outside. The mountains are there on my left, and it's just a beautiful sight. I'm happy. I'm excited. I praise my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for giving me another breath of life, giving me more life today, giving me giving me the foresight to appreciate the things that I'm blessed for. I hope that you'll do the same thing. I hope that you'll get up in the morning, and the very first thing you'll do in the morning is say, thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus, for another day, another breath of life, another opportunity to worship you and to glorify you and to appreciate the gift that is life. And I've really experienced that in the last few days. There have been some things that have not gone so well. There are some things on my shoulders right now with my family, my extended family, that I'm going to have to deal with. And I don't look forward to it one little bit. But I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it with joy, because I know where my joy comes from, and I thank Him so much for giving me the opportunity, the gifts He's given me, and the opportunity to appreciate them. That's this podcast. That's this episode of Road Noise. I feel like it's been a little bit different than the first couple of episodes in my demeanor, in the way I'm talking, in my excitement, in my happiness. I hope you can hear the joy that I'm feeling. I won't promise you that every episode will be like this, but I'm going to do my best to try. It's not fake. This is me. I'm excited. You're getting the real me. And I want to be excited. I want to be excited for you. So if this podcast gets released, and the only reason at this recording that I have not released it yet, any of them yet, is because I haven't set anything up for it. I'm just kind of recording as the mood hits me and as the inspiration hits, because I want everything to be real. I didn't want to script any of this. I wrote down the bullet points so I wouldn't forget to mention anything to you, but I mentioned it all, and I'm happy, and I hope you're happy too. The podcast is called Road Noise. Listen at the end of the podcast for your opportunity to get in touch with me, and if you've had a great week, I want to hear about it. If you haven't had a great week, I want to pray for you. Listen at the end of this podcast, and I'll tell you how you can get in touch with me. But until then, I'm Michael Blackston. This is Road Noise. Hey, thanks for listening. I'm so glad you listened to the end of this podcast, and if you're still listening, it's because you thought, I'd like to get in touch with Mike. I'd love for you to leave me a voicemail. Now, if you call the number, it'll go straight to my voicemail. And if you do leave a voicemail, I'm telling you now, it's probably going to end up on the show if you're not cussing me or something. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you think of the show. Hey, give me a critique. I'm up for it. I want to make this not only something that is great to leave for my wife and kids in years to come and grandkids, but I want it to be something that is helpful and enjoyable for you. Why would this show be helpful to you? Because if you're bored or lonely, I'm that guy that can sit here and somebody you can talk to or listen to talking to you, and maybe that can help you out. So if you like it, or if you want to tell me something and you want your voice heard, then use the phone number, 706-389-0401. That's 706-389-0401. Now, please remember to reference the Road Noise podcast, as that phone number is the one I use for all of my podcasts, so reference Road Noise. Now, if you don't want to make a telephone call, you can email me. In this day and age, it wouldn't do for me not to have an email address, would it? No. It's roadnoisepodcast@gmail.com. That's roadnoisepodcast@gmail.com. Send me an email that way until I hear from you, or until I release another episode, which hopefully will be next week. I'm Mike Blackston. Thanks for listening to Road Noise, and thanks for riding along with me in the passenger seat as we learn to live life 1 mile at a time.